to win the ACC, to be honest, because I just don't know if a 10-2 team with a blowout loss to Georgia and a loss to Louisville and the strength of schedule not being really that great, I don't know how that would get them in just on its own merit of beating South Carolina. With the Gamecocks, on the other hand, they're a 3-loss team, and the biggest issue for them is that they have Ole Miss and Alabama also with 3 losses, also who beat them earlier in the season in front of them. So that's the real problem there. I've always said I think South Carolina is going to jump Alabama and Ole Miss this weekend if they beat Clemson, just because that's a great win over an under 500 Mississippi State and under 500 Auburn team for Alabama and Ole Miss. But I don't know. There's a lot of work to do. But the point is, whoever wins this game, they get to have that conversation at the very least of, hey, we think we're worthy of going to the playoff.
They certainly do. And that, to me, looking back on the history of this rivalry, I think it's safe to say this game is probably the biggest stakes of any South Carolina-Clemson game ever. And certainly there have been plenty of years where Clemson's ranked first or at the top of college football, but most of those years South Carolina, wasn't there with them. Even going back to the end of the 5-game winning streak for Carolina back in 2013, both teams were ranked inside of the top 10, but neither team had a shot at the national championship. Yes, Clemson ended up playing the Orange Bowl that year. I believe Carolina played in the Capital One Bowl, if I remember correctly, but neither team had a shot at winning at all. For both teams here, winning this game could put you in the tournament for having a shot at winning the national championship, which is something we've never been able to say before about this game.
Now, if we had the 12-team playoff back in the early 2010s, we would definitely be talking about those games back then being just as big as it is now, but we didn't because it was the BCS and top 2 teams and all that. This doesn't guarantee you're getting into the playoff, but it sure does feel like the winner of this game is like really inching closer to being there. And it is going to take a few more things to happen, but I think the winner of this game is in a really good spot.
The winner of this game is going to make the strongest case of anybody on the bubble, I think, going into Selection Sunday coming up after Conference Championship Saturday, where you can say, hey, we got this big statement win on the last week of the regular season. Again, Clemson still potentially has the opportunity to play in the ACC Championship game, but if that doesn't happen, if Miami wins tomorrow and this is the final data point for both teams, it's a strong thing to be able to fall back on.
No, most definitely. This is a really good argument, and the great thing is, like I mentioned before, Alabama and Ole Miss are both playing their rivalry games as well. But Mississippi State is horrendous, and Auburn is a 5-win team right now. So neither of those wins should hold much value. And even though they're rivalry games, I don't think they should bump you up significantly, not over a South Carolina team that could potentially beat Clemson this weekend. That's a top 12 win that we're talking about right there. That has to account for something. Am I right? You
would think so. And again, the committee's hard to figure out week to week, so you never really know. But again, if you handle your business tomorrow, you're at least making a strong case for giving yourself a shot to be in. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously, still got to play the game tomorrow and go from there. I want to hit a little bit of what Coach Beamer had to say the other night on Carolina Calls. Was on Tuesday this week because of the Thanksgiving holiday. Dave, if we can get cut number 4. This is Beamer talking about staying composed in what is going to be a game of high emotion.
Great question, Dan. You're exactly right. We talk about it a lot. We talked about it this morning in our team meeting. So Tuesday mornings is kind of the start of the week for us as far as preparation on the next opponent. And we talked about that this morning. One of the first things was, the poise and the discipline and the composure that we need to play with on Saturday, that it will be an emotional game and play really well between the whistles, not getting pre-snap penalties and then getting penalties after the play as well for late hits or unsportsmanlike conducts or whatever it might be. So it's easier said than done in a game like this because of the emotion, but the team that dislikes the other team the most is not necessarily going to win the game. They don't like us, we don't like them. I get it. That's a rivalry game. But the thing for us is going to be the team that plays really, really well, and that goes back to being composed and disciplined. That's where it all starts.
And, you know, for anybody that's played a high school sport or something along those lines, maybe played in college as well, you understand what a game like this is, because when you played your crosstown rival or you played that team for the next county over, there's a lot of familiarity. Maybe you have friends on that team. Maybe you're going up against guys that you've played against your entire life. Like, there's just an extra personal element to a game like this that brings that extra layer of emotion. Coach Beamer is right. The team that hates the other one more doesn't necessarily win the game, but if you can channel that energy and give yourself an extra edge, it can go a long way in helping you perform.
Most definitely. Like, look, you don't want to play super emotional in this game because, look, I mean, I think he brought it up too. Like, the team that is making dumb mistakes and being way too aggressive out there might get penalties and stuff. Like, again, you got to be smart out there, but it is not a bad thing to play with some emotion in this game. Have that edge. Because that's really what you're going to need. Like, the emotions are going to be high in this game. I think it just comes down to, okay, who can control their emotions and not let it get out of hand?
And, you know, Carolina is a team that for the better part of the first half of the season struggled a lot when it came to penalties, double-digit penalties against LSU, all that kind of stuff is controversial. Some of those may have been, obviously. But the back half of the season has been a lot better. But last weekend against Wofford, and we talked about this on Monday, there was a concerning level of penalties, particularly in the first half, 6 of those, in the first half of that game. And, you know, it's Wofford, so it didn't end up costing you anything. But you just hope that was a one-week anomaly, not, reverting back to the norm of what it was earlier on the season. Because if you're making those simple mistakes, false starts, jumping off sides, those kind of things, that's going to cost you in a game like this.
Most definitely. The last thing you want to do is, I really feel like turnovers are probably going to be the end-all, be-all in this game, but penalties can really be like the next worst thing to happen. So for South Carolina, look, last week wasn't great with penalties. You really just got to limit them now this week and get right back on track.
Yeah, again, don't give Clemson any free passes there. And speaking of turnovers, they're a team that doesn't really turn the ball over at all. So you're going to be very fortunate if you can get a couple of takeaways from this Clemson team as, you'll see what happens coming up tomorrow. By the way, high noon kick. We'll have pregame coverage starting for you bright and early tomorrow, 7 a.m. Myself and Terry Ford will be here in studio with Gamecocks Game Day, and we'll be calling you sometime around 8:45, so you don't exactly get to sleep in for this one tomorrow.
No, I wasn't planning on it. So,
well, I'm imagining, gosh, because I was talking about, or Elijah was talking about the other day, you guys probably have to leave at like, what, 6, 7 in the morning to get up there?
Well, so I'm going to actually be in Clemson today.
Oh, you're getting up there today. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll probably actually be in the Greenville area. But,
okay.
So I'll probably end up getting up around like 7 anyway. So
okay.
It's good. Yeah. So
gotcha.
We'll see.
Yeah, well, for anybody that's going to the game, get up and leave early. I've not been to Clemson yet, but I'm told it's a one-road in-and-out kind of town, so I can imagine that's a nightmare on game day.
Oh, most definitely.
Well, we'll dive into a little bit more of this matchup, talk about running the ball for both teams and how important that's going to be coming up tomorrow. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you on your Football Friday, Black Friday edition here on The Game.
Again, just go to one and register. It's the Lawyer Lisa Special Teams Contest from 107.5 The Game.
107.5 The Game. Broadcasting live from the Herndon Chevrolet Studios.
Take up to $20,000 off new Silverados.
Stop by or shop online today and see why Herndon Chevrolet makes you smile. Together, let's drive.
Hey, I want to tell you about our show sponsor, Pete Alewine Pool and Spa. They're an award-winning swimming pool builder that's been in the business for 25 years with more than 40 years of pool construction experience. They service the entire Midlands area, whether you're looking for weekly cleaning maintenance or chlorine to salt conversion with services like safety cover installs and safety fence installs. You can check out all their offerings at the showroom in Lexington and talk to their experts about any and everything you might need. I know when I get my home and I want a pool in my backyard, that is definitely the way I'm going to go. And so I'm going to go to Pete Alewine Pool and Spa, and you guys should too. If you're interested, their retail store is located at 5541 Sunset Boulevard. Again, that's 5541 Sunset Boulevard out in Lexington. And you can also check them out online at PeteAleWinePools.com.
Group that's gotten better week to week. A team that's learned how to practice. A team that's got a bunch of young players that are ascending. They still have a lot of work to do. Still have a lot of work ahead of them this week, and it's obviously the task at hand is the most important thing. And the reason we've been able to improve is because we have learned how to practice.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Football Friday, getting you set for South Carolina and Clemson coming up tomorrow. Again, high noon kick. Premium coverage starting here at 7 a.m. for Gamecocks game day. And then you can join myself, Terry Ford, for the final watch party of the regular season, at least, over at O'Hara's Public House in Lexington, 131 Main Street at noon for that game, which, of course, you can listen to right here on 107.5 The Game. That was Dow Loggins talking on Wednesdays, coordinators always do, about the assessment of the offense after 11 games. He mentioned things that they've improved on. And, Jack, we've talked about this pretty much for the entire month where, we know the signature of a Beamer team is one side of the football, takes a huge step forward in the last month of the season, and this year it's been the offense.
Yeah, no doubt. The offense has been so much better this month. And honestly, I think we don't talk about it enough, Tyler. I think the offense really has shown strides the entire season. Like from week 1 to now, like honestly, week 2, they started playing a lot better.
Yep.
Against Kentucky. And LSU it carried over and all that. So they've been playing really well the entire year. But I think it's been highly noted this month in particular, they've been on fire. They're scoring at will, it feels like. They are really – Dow Loggins is getting to the point where I feel like he can really call whatever he wants with Lenora Sellers and feel good about it. So you hope that you have all your weapons out there on Saturday against Clemson, specifically with like the tight ends and stuff. But I really do feel like the sky's the limit for this offense.
Well, and one thing that's kind of been there the entire season has been the run game. And, going back to the beginning of the year, Carolina's basically a 60-40 run-to-pass type of team. And obviously the passing offense wouldn't necessarily where you wanted it to be. That's a huge step forward in the last month of the season. And again, for anybody that knows football knows when you're passing the ball really well, that sets up the run really well because defense is going to start keying on the pass. Guess what? Now you have holes to run through. And we've obviously seen a lot of success from not only Rocket Sanders, but Lenora Sellers as well. And I know when you kind of look at this Clemson defense, the numbers suggest that they're one of the best rushing defenses in the entire country. But when you go back and look at their actual game logs against Stanford, Louisville, the Citadel last week, all three of those games, they allowed over 200 yards on the ground. Stanford in particular ran for $168 against them in the first half of that game, and it was 17-7 at halftime. So you can run on these guys. It's not completely impossible. It's just, it seems to be a little more selective on the teams that have been able to do it against them.
Yeah, it's a good thing that Clemson's coming off a game from a South Carolina standpoint that the Citadel was able to run for 288 on those guys. So, look, it can work. And the benefit for South Carolina is they aren't just a straight, they do like to run the football, but they're not just a straight run-up-the-gut type of team. They also run the option, as we well know. So I feel like with Sellers, Rocket, you get those guys going. Look, you really can have a great day offensively. And
going back to that game they played against Stanford, where, again, the Cardinal ran for over 200 yards against them, even though that game ended up being a blowout at the very end. Ashton Daniels, who is the quarterback for Stanford, did run for 87 yards. And kind of going back and looking through the log of games of teams that Clemson's played, again, their only win against a team that's already in a bowl is against Pitt a couple weeks ago. They've not played the best competition, but I feel pretty comfortable in saying Lenora Sellers is the most mobile quarterback they have seen this entire season. So he's bringing an element of rushing that I don't think they have anything to compare to, given who they played so far. No, definitely not. And I do remember that Stanford game. Like, Stanford did make some early mistakes in that game, but they did keep up with Clemson in terms of, I think they out-yardaged them maybe in the first half. It was impressive, even though they were down. But again, Sellers, he's a different type of look. They've seen Ashton Daniels, but again, it's totally different just because of how versatile he is as a dual threat type of quarterback. And it begs the question to me, on the ground game in particular, who is the most important guy tomorrow? Is it Lenora Sellers or is it Rocket Sanders? I would probably say, I think Rocket, because, look, it's one thing if Sellers is the lead runner, but if you're not able to have that other guy in the run game that could be effective, then it's going to be tough because Clemson's going to zero in on Sellers. So you definitely want Rocket to get going. And again, I said it last week, games like this are where the greats are made. So Rocket, if he's having a big game,
he'll cement his status as a South Carolina legend with a game like this against Clemson.
Yeah, I think this is one of those games where Rocket probably owns the stats when it comes to rushing, but Sellers' rushes might end up having the biggest impact, not particularly just when he cuts and runs themselves, but the fact that, again, you're having to account for him. You're putting a spy at linebacker on him because he does have that threat of running. And guess what? That opens up more things down the field in your passing game, which, again, has been so much better this month.
No, most definitely. And, again, that's why I think Sanders being the top guy on the run game can be important because, again, that helps Sellers in ways of, okay, he's not the only guy out there running the football effectively. When he's able to do the things he wants to, like he can run at will, but he can also DQ with getting a nice pass play off too on a fake handoff and find an open target.
And on the other side of things, Phil Maffa, who, God, I feel like he's been playing at Clemson for 15 years now, it seems like. Now that Will Shipley's moved on to the NFL, has finally become the feature back in that offense and has done a great job this year, over 1,000 yards, top 4 in the ACC when it comes to rushing. But I go back to their last game against Pittsburgh when they were really dealing with offensive line issues, last meaningful game against Pittsburgh, wasn't really able to get anything going. 17 carries, 17 yards in that game against a decent Pittsburgh defense, but not one as good as South Carolina's, I don't think. So, and we'll see what the status of all the offensive linemen is. Again, Dabo Sweeney is pretty coy about it earlier on in this week. That could be a big factor if Carolina can keep him grounded tomorrow.
No, that's going to be a huge factor because, again, Clemson's offensive line is going to be banged up. Like, they're already going to be missing Trent Howard, and they're already down to 3 guys with season-long injuries and stuff, and 2 on the day-to-day list. So, look, they are banged up as a unit on that O-line, and I think that really benefits Carolina's D-line because, look, even if Clemson had the best 5 out there, South Carolina, I think, should still feel pretty good about because they can match up just about anyone. So, look, stopping the run in this game is going to be huge because that's something you struggled with last year against this team, and it's something you struggled with against Missouri and nearly got beat. So, recency bias, you really got to slow down the run in this game.
We'll see what happens. That's certainly going to be a big factor coming up tomorrow. I don't believe there's no rain or anything in the forecast, so I don't think weather's going to be an issue. So it's just going to be kind of cold.
Just a cold day of football.
Yeah, which, you know what? After Thanksgiving, it should be cold, right? Like, that's just the norm. If it was 70 degrees, we'd be concerned, right?
Yeah, it'd feel like October.
Yeah, so. No, this is the weekend where, cold weather football is all the rage. Certainly saw that last night in Green Bay for sure.
Oh, gosh, man. Did you see Tulane lost last night?
I did. That saved the Big 12's butt in a lot of ways because Tulane was threatening for a playoff spot themselves, but it seems like the AAC has now lost that ability, and we'll see what happens in the Big 12 this weekend to see who's playing in their championship game next weekend.
Yeah, they can thank Mario Anderson for that.
Ooh,
so.
Man, he ran for a $177 last night. He was on fire.
He was solid.
Bill brought this point up earlier. Again, everybody's going to be a little sour when somebody decides to leave in the transfer portal, especially when you have a guy that it's essentially stepped down a level to go to the group of 5. But I think that deal ended up working out well for everyone. Mario Anderson obviously is at Memphis and having success, and Rocket Sanders has come here and been the Rocket Sanders that we hoped he was going to be from his days back at Arkansas. So I don't think there's any ill will at this point in time on how all that went down.
Nope, it's a deal that worked out on both sides, and you're just happy it's working out.
We're going to take a look around what else is happening around college football this weekend. It's been a chaotic regular season. Is there any chaos on tap for this weekend as well? We'll discuss that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Towerhead and Jack Beltry on your Football Friday, Black Friday edition here on The Game.
Yeah, I think just in general, and I've said this from day one, I think when you have two programs as large as these two programs are, as close to each other as they are, it doesn't make a ton of sense for them not to play. So it always felt weird not playing. And so now to be playing and to be playing for what we're playing for, I'd imagine it'll be pretty electric Saturday.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points Hour. Head and Jack Veltri along with you on your Football Friday, getting set for the big rivalry weekend across all of college football. And Jack, I think all eyes are going to set upon College Station on Saturday night. That was the voice of Mike Elko talking about what he expects to be a very electric atmosphere. And as we transition into our Laying the Wood segment brought to you by our friends over at Georgia Pacific, that crowd of 100,000 is going to be laying the wood to anything in burnt orange and white rolling into College Station this weekend.
I don't really know how it's going to be because it's been so long since we've seen the Lone Star Showdown, but it's going to probably be absolutely electric and probably beyond anything we have for our expectations. I expect Kyle Field to be as loud as we've ever heard it before. I
think I've been looking forward to this game since the day it was announced Texas and Oklahoma were coming to the SEC. And look, we didn't know for sure what the schedule was going to look like, but it's like there's no way that Texas comes into the league and this does not become an annual game again. Last time it was played was, it might have actually been on Thanksgiving back in 2011. Justin Tucker hit the game-winning field goal. And, the fact that they haven't played the game in 11 years, 13 years is one thing. The fact that the A&M fan base has been stewing on a loss for 13 years just elevates what, again, is going to be probably one of the best environments we've ever seen coming up tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's going to be massive. And the fact of this game, beginning of the year, we didn't know what A&M was going to be. We knew Texas would be good. But if A&M weren't good, this game was still going to be massive because it could be like a de facto eliminate Texas from the playoff picture. Tomorrow, it is that because one of these teams is going to, well, Texas maybe not, but A&M, they're fighting for their lives tomorrow. They win, they're going to the SEC title game. They got to win against Georgia, so we'll see.
I would say this. I don't think Texas, even though they're the number 3 team, I don't think they can assume that with a loss they'd be safe because they don't have really any other credible win to fall back on if they don't get this one tomorrow. And the two best teams they would have faced, being Texas A&M and Georgia, would have beaten them. So I don't think I assume they would probably still be in, but I can't say that with 100% certainty if they lose this game tomorrow. So I think both teams go into this with a back up against the wall, we have to win out mentality.
No, and I expect this to be a great game tomorrow. I'm glad the Carolina-Clemson game's at noon, so that way everyone's able to watch this game because it is going to be the main event tomorrow night. Like, yeah, Michigan-Ohio State's always a great game and stuff, but Michigan's not good this year. Yeah, Carolina-Clemson's probably the biggest game in this state and for many, but Texas A&M, we've been waiting forever for this game to return, and it's going to be humongous tomorrow.
And I picked A&M to win this game. I just want a fun game. Yeah, I don't want it to be a blowout either way. I want this to be a 4-quarter fight that keeps us locked in the entire time.
I agree. I want this to be both teams throwing jabs at each other, 45-42. Absolute craziness. Go to overtime. I'd love to see it.
A 45-42 like overtime game, just as like a tip of the cap to their old Big 12 roots, right?
Yes. Gotta have this game get out of hand and go crazy.
Yeah, that would certainly be a lot of fun. And again, you kind of think about it. Well, what helps out Carolina more in this game, where a potential loss to Texas maybe tumbles them down the pecking order a little bit, or the fact that maybe A&M winning, which would obviously move them up, helps South Carolina's resume out a lot by saying, hey, guess what? We beat the team pretty handily that's now playing for the SEC championship.
It's a double-edged sword because here's the issue with it. Yes, it looks better on South Carolina's resume if A&M wins this game and they go to the SEC title. And let's say A&M wins the SEC championship. That is by far South Carolina's best win on the schedule, unless Clemson wins the ACC title. But here's the problem with that.
Both could happen, by the way.
Yes, both could happen. Here's the problem with that, though. A&M would automatically be in as a 3-loss team.
Yep.
You have to assume Georgia would get the nod over South Carolina as a 3-loss team simply because it made it to the SEC title game.
Right.
And then what do you do with Texas as a 2-loss team? Yes, they don't have the best wins, but let's say it's a tight game and they lose to A&M on like a field goal.
Yeah.
They only have 2 losses, and you're not putting a 3-loss Carolina in over a 2-loss Texas team. I hate to say it, but you probably need Texas to win this game just for the simple fact of there's no way you can get 3 more SEC teams in. It would only have to be 2.
Well, and even if Texas had 3 losses, if we're being for real, if the committee's really trying to evaluate Texas and Carolina, throw out the strength of schedule, throw out the strength record, all that kind of stuff, it comes down to brands. And what's going to get more eyeballs on your playoff? Texas being in, right?
Exactly. It's the unfortunate truth that everyone has to face. And there's another team that I know we're going to talk about right after this that has that same concept because they might be the biggest brand of college football.
In fact, let's go right to that. Cut number 28 here, Dave. Kalen DeBoer earlier on this week talking about moving past that loss and focusing on the Iron Bowl.
Yeah, and just already talking about it yesterday and in the team meeting, and you can already feel leadership stepping up and really talk about what this game means to them, what this means to us, what it means to everyone, both sides, the state. 365 days of the year. Ever since I've been here, I think I hear about it every day. And so understand what it means and the excitement, and we have to put and learn from last week and be better because of it, and turn the page and get ready to practice tomorrow and do everything we can to be successful on Saturday.
My question for this game, what Alabama are we going to see? They've been so Jekyll and Hyde this year. Just a couple weeks ago, they went into Death Valley and completely dominated what we thought was a pretty good LSU team. And then last week, they went into Norman, Oklahoma against a team that nobody thought was even going to make a bowl game, a team that Carolina dominated a month ago and lost by 3 touchdowns. I don't know who shows up tomorrow for Alabama.
That's the thing, man, because they were rolling before Oklahoma last week. Like, they were pretty much scoring at a premium, like a high pace. And then they face a great defense in Oklahoma. Let's give a lot of credit there. The Sooners have a solid unit on the defensive end, and they shut down Alabama in that high-powered offense. And here's the thing. We've noticed this has become more of a trend lately. They force Jalen Milroe to make mistakes.
Yep.
When you do that, your chances of winning go up exponentially. So, and here's the thing. This Auburn team, they are not some pushover. Yes, the way I think you beat Auburn this weekend is you beat them at their own game. Make them make mistakes. Make them make defensive mental errors. Make them miss tackles. Make them have false starts. Auburn's going to kill themselves with penalties and silly things in this game where you don't even have to do anything. However, Alabama needs to just play their brand of football. They cannot be turning the ball over frequently. It's at home, so that really benefits them. They're a great home team.
Sure.
You can't make mistakes in this game when you know the other team on the other side is more prone to having those types of mistakes.
Well, and that's the thing. This might surprise a lot of people. Auburn's got the 6th best offense in the SEC in terms of total yards per game. But like you said, the penalties, the turnovers, Peyton Thorne, against Oklahoma threw a late pick 6 or whatever it was. Like, when he can avoid, or that team can avoid shooting themselves in the foot, they're actually pretty efficient. And last week, for the most part, save for one turnover by Peyton Thorne, they did that and were able to beat Texas A&M.
Yeah, and the thing with Auburn is their defense isn't half bad either. Like, again, they did a pretty good job against A&M. I know late in the game it kind of got a little much, but I think Auburn, when push came to shove, they played pretty well. And here's the other thing that we need to be talking about with this game. Yeah, Alabama's fighting for a playoff spot and stuff, though I don't even think they are deserving because they have 2 of the worst losses all year. Auburn's fighting to get into a bowl game. So if Auburn can bear down. They haven't beaten Alabama in Bryant-Denny since 2010, since the Cam Newton comeback and the Cam back. It's going to take that type of effort to get the job done because even with Alabama having 3 losses, this game means so much in the state of Alabama, and it's going to be a massive game on both sides.
Definitely going to be a huge one. Another huge one coming up tomorrow, as it always is. Going head-to-head with South Carolina is Ohio State and Michigan. We'll touch on that real quick as well, and then get Jack's final thoughts ahead of tomorrow's game between South Carolina and the Tigers. It is the Extra Point, Sourhead and Jack Veltri on your Football Friday here on The Game.
We got to have, that edge, and we will. because we know what's at stake. I mean, we've felt what it's like to not win this game, and it's bad. It's one of the worst things that's happened to me in my life, quite honestly. Other than losing my father and a few other things, like it's quite honestly for my family the worst thing that's happened. So we can never have that happen again, ever. And that's been the approach all season.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points Hour. And Jack Belcher along with you on your Football Friday. Ohio State head coach Ryan Day talking about how awful of a feeling it is to lose to Michigan, something that they've done consistently the past couple of years. Of course, Michigan winning the national championship last year, having a couple of playoff appearances before that. The last time Ohio State beat them, 2019. Remember, they didn't play this game back in 2020 because of COVID. So that's something that's been burning on Ryan Day's mind for about half a decade now.
Oh, man. And look, Ryan Day gets a lot of heat because, number one, he hasn't been able to beat Michigan. Number two, I mean, outside of 2020, the COVID year, Ohio State hasn't gotten to the national championship and won it.
Nope.
And they've always seemed to fall short. So that's part of the problem, too, is that, yeah, he's not beating Michigan. And when he even sneaks into the playoff, he's not able to get over the hump. So, yes, this game, look, I can only imagine. Ohio State fans are rough on him when he loses this game. So to say he needs it tomorrow is massive.
There is no excuse for Ohio State to lose this game. They are
no excuse.
10 times the team that Michigan is this year. This should not be a problem at all.
You are 3 touchdown favorites in this game. Oh, and you're in your own backyard at the Horseshoe. You should not even. This game should be over. I'm not saying by halftime, but it should be like 2 scores at the very least. Like, look, Michigan has been awful this year, 6-5. Yeah, like that's like it's still the rivalry, it's the game. Anything can happen, but like Ohio State is the superior team here.
Yeah, they definitely are. And again, they've got all their goals ahead of them. As of right now, they're locked into the Big Ten championship game as long as they don't lose this game tomorrow. So they get a rematch at Oregon coming up next week. Even if they lose that game, they're still going to be in the playoff and likely have a shot at hosting a first-round game. So all their goals still ahead of them. Just don't trip up over what should be a pretty easy layup compared to years past against Michigan.
Yeah, and I think they're taking the right mindset into this game. I really liked what Will Howard had to say about this game. Like, we hear, like, and it's not an issue, but, like, you hear Lenore Sellers and some of these other guys and quarterbacks say, like, oh, it's just another game in the rivalry games that they're playing. But Will Howard, this is his first year at Ohio State, and he's treating it like, yeah, this is the biggest game of the year. Like, I like that kind of mentality.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of this game Will Howard watched growing up, but it's certainly a big deal. And being a Ohio State quarterback, that is a heavy, cross to bear, having this game on your schedule every single year. But again, this is the best chance that Ohio State has to dominate Michigan that they've had in a while.
That's right, and it helps them with momentum going into the Big Ten championship against a very good Oregon team next week.
Absolutely. About 2 more minutes to go here. And again, we'll get your final thoughts coming up tomorrow on Gamecocks game day, sometime around 8:30, 8:45. What's going to happen in the upstate tomorrow? How's this one going to go down?
I think Carolina's going to win. I've said it since August, even before we knew how the season was going to go. I just have that feeling that, like, South Carolina's playing their best football right now. Clemson, they really haven't played the toughest schedule, and they've played pretty well since that Georgia game. I just think Carolina's proven before that they're battle-tested, and they've gone on the road and beaten this team before. So I know that was 2 years ago, but I just have a feeling that if they win the turnover battle, they limit the mistakes, and they just do what they are accustomed to normally doing, I think they can win this game. So I do have South Carolina winning. I believe maybe by a field goal or maybe a few points. I think it's like 34-30 or something like that. 34-28 is my score I have. So I have South Carolina winning by 6, and I think it's going to be a great day out in the upstate.
Yeah, so, when Clemson's played the two of the better teams on their schedule in Georgia and Louisville, they lost those games pretty significantly. The Louisville game doesn't look as bad because they got some late scores there, but don't make a mistake. The Cardinals dominated that game, and they played Pitt without Eli Holstein a couple weeks ago, so who knows how different that game could have been if he ended up starting instead of Nate Yarnell. But I don't know, just the rivalry aspect of this makes me think this is going to be a 4-quarter dogfight, and it as nervous as it might make you, it may come down to an Alex Herrera field goal at the end to win this thing.
Oh, my gosh. Don't even say that.
Now, their kicker's not great either.
Exactly. So, look, this game is going to be a war. It is for such a bigger task than just a trophy or bragging rights. But that's what makes it so exciting. And I think it's going to be possibly the second biggest game of the weekend, if not the biggest, at least in my opinion. So,
well, there's plenty of big games coming up this weekend, including a couple happening today on Black Friday, which I'm very excited about. And I'll dive into that coming up a little bit to start off hour number 2. But Jack, for those that don't know, you've been joining me from outside, so you should probably go inside and get warm.
Yes, sir. I'm definitely going to do so. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving, my man, and we'll catch up tomorrow.
Yes, sir. We'll catch up with you tomorrow on Gamecocks Game Day. It is The Extra Point. He is Jack Beltry from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head. Hour number 2 coming up. We'll dive into what else is happening around college football this weekend as your Football Friday, Black Friday edition rolls on here on The Game. Welcome back in, hour number 2. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Football Friday here on the Game. Rivalry Week Friday, Black Friday. Whole lot going on, and excited for what's going to happen tomorrow up at Memorial Stadium with South Carolina and Clemson. As, of course, Carolina looking to keep themselves alive in the college football playoff race. I don't know if beating Clemson straight up gets you in. I think you are going to need a little bit of help, but you at least make a strong final statement in the regular season that the committee's certainly going to have to weigh coming up next Sunday after all the conference championship games are done. You know, the beautiful thing about Thanksgiving weekend, aside from the holiday, is that we pretty much get wall-to-wall football. Of course, you have a full slate of NFL Thanksgiving games that happened yesterday, though most of those games didn't end up being all that competitive. You have the Chiefs and the Raiders playing today at 3 o'clock on Amazon Prime as the NFL once again decides to take over another day on the calendar. Black Friday seems to be that next one, in addition to Christmas Day coming up here in a little less than a month. But you also get a full slate of college football today as well as tomorrow to wrap up the regular season. In fact, kicking off here in right about 2 hours at high noon, you have a couple of interesting games, to say the least. One of those with college football playoff implications as Boise State host Oregon State for the final game of the regular season. Boise State will play in the Mountain West Conference Championship game next weekend as they, given the fact that Tulane lost last night, are in sole possession as far as ranked teams go of holding that Group of 5 spot for the college football playoff. And I don't even know if losing to Oregon State would be enough to suddenly tumble them out of the standings. So they seem to be well in control of their own destiny in that regard. And where they sit right now, considering the fact they're ahead of the entire Pac-12 or Big 12, they might actually have a shot at getting a bye in the first round if things continue on the way that they are. So again, Boise State playing at noon on Fox, and then same time over on ABC. Not as intriguing of a matchup now, considering the fact that Colorado's playoff chances got dinged quite a bit with their loss to Kansas, as they play host to Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State. And which, by the way, Boise and Colorado both hosting games at noon. That's 10 o'clock local kicks for both. That's insane. But TV wins out, I guess. Man, Oklahoma State. I think so many of us, if you didn't pencil them in as like your Big 12 champion, you probably at least had them in the Big 12 championship game against like a Utah, right? And that has completely gone out the window. Their season has been awful in terms of what the expectations were. In Colorado, a team that, again, rubs people the wrong way at times when it comes to Deion. Most people thought they weren't going to get to a bowl game, and up until last week, they were still in serious contention for making the college football playoff and can still technically make the Big 12 title game, but a lot of chaos has to unfold tomorrow and on or this weekend, in order for that to happen. So again, those games coming up at high noon, and of course, plenty of other action. East Carolina Navy at noon as well. Minnesota and Wisconsin on CBS. But one game that I think everybody here locally is going to be locked into is what's happening at 3:30 over on ABC, the Egg Bowl. Yes, traditionally the Thanksgiving night game, which I will admit it was a little bit weird not having that game on last night. Especially once the Packers started running away from the Dolphins. That's the point where we say, okay, let me flip over and see what weird, chaotic things are happening in the Egg Bowl. It's going to hit a little bit differently at 3:30 coming up today, but excited for it nonetheless. Let's hear from Rebels head coach Lane Kiffin, cut number 27 here, Dave, on the uncertainty of his team being able to reach the college football playoff now.
Well, it's a new age now. As you guys have asked before, I usually don't ever speak about those things to the team because 1 week at a time, but I did a few weeks ago say, hey, if that's what motivates you and gets you to prepare better and stuff, have talked about that before with him. So, I would have thought after the game that was out, but then when so many different things happened with us being the early game and percentages now saying that's alive. And so I did tell him that. But I think there should be so much motivation, to keep the Egg Bowl here, the trophy here, and win this game and play really well. But if that's added and helps them to know that, playoffs are still alive and that they get kind of the first shot to show everybody on a national stage, as opposed to a Saturday game where, these people that make these decisions don't necessarily see all the games because there's so many going on. You got a shot to show everybody.
Unfortunately for Lane Kiffin, they're taking on a Mississippi State team that is terrible. Look, Jeff Levy's first year there, the Zach Arnett thing, the one-year experiment didn't work. It's going to take a while for the Bulldogs to build themselves back up as a program, and as opposed to what Carolina has with Clemson tomorrow, you don't have a quality opponent to make one last statement with. And even with a 70-point win today over Mississippi State, it seems like if Ole Miss is going to make it in the playoff, they're going to have some chaos unfold ahead of them to kind of vault them back in. Because for one, they're behind Alabama, who's kind of in the driver's seat right now as the best 3-loss team. And of course, Carolina does have a number 12 Clemson ahead of them that if they beat could make the case for vaulting over the Ole Miss Rebels, even though Ole Miss did come in here and dominate. But regardless of the scenarios that end up playing out, if Ole Miss doesn't reach the playoff, this season's a failure. Okay, plain and simple. We talked the entire offseason. We praised Lane Kiffin for the roster that they built. At media days or whatever, he was talking about, the guys in the locker room talking about a last dance mentality, saying, hey, we're all these hired guns, right? Come in here and do a job and then move on to our careers to the NFL or whatever it may be. And the fact that team, with probably one of the, if not the most talented rosters in the entire nation, might miss the playoffs because of ugly, unexcusable losses to Kentucky and to Florida, it's a failure. Plain and simple. Now, it's not going to cost Kiffin his job or anything, but there's no guarantee you're going to have this kind of roster again. And the fact they came up short, or probably going to come up short, disappointing all around for everybody out there in Oxford. And again, you hate that they came in here and did the way they did to South Carolina, because that is something they do hold over the Gamecocks. But again, I think Carolina having a win over Clemson could give them a shot at vaulting over Ole Miss. I don't know if it's enough to vault them over Alabama, though. We will certainly have to see. Then coming up tonight at 7:30, following that game on ABC, you get clean, old-fashioned. Hey, let's hear from Kirby Smart talking about not getting caught up in the emotions of the rivalry. Cut number 26, Dave.
Yeah, I don't think you get real emotional about things like that. I think you're a lot better, coach, when you stay composed and you coach your players and you teach your players what it's going to take to win the game, which it will be a emotional game. But I don't get emotional about it. It's an interstate rivalry. It's a chance at a state championship. It's a lot of pride. It's a lot of history in the game. But the game's played between the lines, between the players.
Kirby Smart doesn't get emotional about a lot of things, for those that have not noticed. And look, when you look at this game on paper, it's a game that Georgia should be fine in. Favored by 18.5. It's a home game. They're got the SEC championship game coming up next weekend. But what Tech has done this year is enough to make you raise an eyebrow, right? They were undefeated at home for the first time since 1999. They beat Florida State in week number 1 in Ireland, which we now know that Florida State team is not good, but at the time was a significant win. And then, of course, just a couple weeks ago, pulled the upset against a number 4 Miami team at the time. So this team is capable of a lot of things. They run the ball extremely, extremely well, and that's something that could end up, being a concern for Georgia this year, is their rush defense hasn't exactly been the best. They're 9th in the SEC so far in rush defense, averaging about 125 yards per game, and that's something that Tech could certainly take advantage of. But for the weird thing about Kirby Smart Georgia teams is when you look at things on paper, no matter how much they're favored by against these lesser opponents, they have a way of making these games more interesting than they should be. I mean, even last week against UMass, the Minutemen ran up and down the field on them in the first half and ended up scoring 21 points before, Georgia ended up pulling away. And I don't know what the rhyme or reason behind that is necessarily, but, if you're looking for an interesting play today, taking Georgia Tech to cover the 18.5 might actually be something that could end up coming to fruition because for whatever reason, sometimes, or a lot of the time really, when Kirby Smart teams play these, weaker opponents, and not that an ACC team is all that much weaker, but they have a way of making these games more uncomfortable than they should be. Of course, Georgia, even with a loss, still controls its own destiny next weekend by, winning the SEC either over Texas or Texas A&M. But again, this is an important game in the state of Georgia. The Yellow Jackets have not gotten the better of Georgia since Kirby's first year back in 2016. And, I was listening to some Atlanta radio the other day, and one of the hosts brought up a really good point. This is the most talented Georgia Tech team that they've brought to the table for this game since probably that 2016 game. This is the best shot that they have. And again, not that they'd necessarily ruin Georgia's playoff chances, but they eliminate the mulligan, essentially. If Georgia Tech can pull this upset, and look, I give a lot of credit to Brent Key. He's a very good head coach, and he has turned that Tech program around compared to the doldrums that it was in with Jeff Collins only a couple years ago. Very good coach, a player's coach, guy that obviously played there and understands what it means to be the Georgia Tech head coach. He's got those guys playing some really darn good football as of right now, and I'm intrigued to see how this matchup ends up going tonight. But if Tech were able to pull the upset, they would eliminate the mulligan for Georgia. Because, again, I assume losing a conference championship game won't kick you out of the playoffs. So even if Georgia were to lose next weekend as a 10-2 team, I think they'd probably still be in. However, if Georgia loses to Tech, falls outside the top 10, and then loses the championship game next weekend, well, guess what? They're out. So Tech can play a part in ruining Georgia's college football playoff chances. We'll see what happens. Again, that game coming up at 7:30 tonight. And again, has the potential to be a very fun and very intriguing matchup to say the least. Check out with our guy, intern Joe Machika, from the Big Spur coming up next. Get his thoughts on what's happening with Clemson and South Carolina tomorrow, as well as recap a dominant, keyword, dominant performance by Don Staley's crew yesterday at the Fort Myers tip-off as they took the wood to Iowa State, to say the least. With that coming up, it is the Extra Point Towerhead along with you. A reminder, kickoff tomorrow for the Gamecocks and the Tigers at high noon. Pregame coverage starting at 7 a.m. Gamecocks game day with myself and Terry Ford. And then, of course, our watch party tomorrow afternoon at O'Hara's for the high noon kickoff on Main Street down there in Lexington. Joe Machika from the Big Spur coming up next. Extra Point Towerhead along with you on your Black Friday Football Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Football Friday, Black Friday edition here on the game, getting you set for a full weekend of college football, obviously highlighted here locally by what's going to happen in the upstate between South Carolina and Clemson, as it does each and every Friday. Our guy Joe Machika from the Big Spur checking in. And Joe, man, we've been talking about this all week. One of the, if not the most important games in the history of this rivalry coming up tomorrow between South Carolina and Clemson, given the implications for both teams.
Yeah, Tyler, huge playoff implications for rivalry week once again. A lot of playoff implications for a lot of different teams, but I mean, for South Carolina and Clemson, you got to take care of your share to be in the mix for the playoff. I think both teams goes for both teams, but obviously South Carolina might need a little bit more work done ahead of them to get into the playoff. But I mean, shoot, you got to check the box, right? You got to win against Clemson. That's always part of the deal. Beating Clemson now, I mean, if you want to go to the college football playoff, you have to do it anyway. So it's a huge game up in Death Valley, and should be exciting stuff tomorrow.
I go back to something that Beamer said in his presser on Tuesday that really kind of stuck out to me, because after the Alabama loss, Carolina was sitting at 3-3 on the season. And I think everybody, including most people here locally, said, well, they're definitely not going to have any shot at making the college football playoff. But Beamer said, no, we kind of had the back up against the wall mentality from there on out, and obviously have won the 5 games since to get themselves to 8-3 and obviously 15th in the college football playoff. So, and I don't know if that's the main motivating factor for why they've been so successful, why the offense has taken off in the last month. But yeah, they haven't had any margin for error since that Alabama loss, and they quite frankly haven't.
Yeah, no, Tyler, I agree with you. It's been backed up against the wall, and if you can't play with that same kind of energy against Clemson, you shouldn't go to South Carolina. You shouldn't be playing in this rivalry game, right? There's enough fuel to the fire. There should be enough hate in this rivalry to make you play hard enough to where if the better team's going to win this game, you would hope that the officials don't get involved. I mean, it's going to be officials from the SEC, I believe, since they are visiting. Yep. So you never know with any of that juju based on what we've seen this year so far with LSU and all that. But again, this game usually comes down to the better team winning. So bring your A game and play hard, play fast, and you can get the job done. I was going to say, you might think having SEC officials would be an advantage, but given how awful SEC officiating has been this year, that's not necessarily the case. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was thinking, right? I mean, you maybe from the ACC, if it were in Williams-Brice, we might get benefited for once. But so I don't know. It'll be interesting. Again, I think South Carolina's ready. Clemson's ready. Dabo, they certainly want to turn the tide and a lot of the talk around their program around. So this is a big game, Tyler. This is one of the bigger Palmetto Bowls in a while. Both teams ranked in the top 15. So I'm excited. Noon kick out there in Death Valley. Yeah, noon kick. I said this earlier. I'm glad that we get this game done early, because I don't want any distractions for Texas and Texas A&M coming up tomorrow night, because that's going to be hopefully a sight to behold that we've, I think, all been waiting on, if not this year, for the past couple of years. Yeah, I agree. Texas Tech, Texas A&M, it's going to be great. I agree. It perfectly teed up there in that night slot, and big game again. A lot of playoff implications too, and it'll be interesting to see, how what happens with these conference championship games as we roll into them furthermore into the playoff era, right? Because I mean, all these coaches are talking about how the conference championship game is only going to hurt them. So it'll be interesting to see if they expand the playoff, bump conference championship games out. But again, Tyler, there's good football. Texas A&M is going to be a doozy out there in Austin under the lights. Getting back to Carolina and Clemson, though. Again, the focus of this game for a lot of people is going to be the college football playoff implications, which are obviously very important to both sides. And I said this earlier as well. I don't know if beating Clemson is enough to get you in, but you at least make a strong case and give yourself a solid argument to make for the committee when they're deciding who's going to be in coming up, next Sunday after the conference championship games. But outside of that, this game is still very important for South Carolina, aside from the rivalry aspect, which is always important to try and, take home the Palmetto Bowl trophy and have bragging rights for an entire year. But you have a shot at your 9th win of the regular season, which would set you up for a 10th win in a bowl game. And again, when you talk about the history of South Carolina football, it's not long and luxurious. There's only been a handful of double-digit win seasons in the entire history of this program, pretty much all those coming with Steve Spurrier, if I'm remembering correctly. So you have a chance to do something it's rarefied
here, and something that does not happen a lot. And in addition to that, Coach Beamer, by winning this game tomorrow, would have the most wins through the first 4 years of any head coach in South Carolina history, eclipsing what Spurrier did in his first 4 years.
It's pretty good, Tyler. That is pretty good. It's time to pay the piper if he wants to stay on track. I think for Shane, I mean, obviously you don't want to lose 2 in a row to Clemson. So I think since you lost last year, you need to get things back on track. You want to keep that winning percentage against Clemson high, and you know, not have to go on any win streaks down the road, and keep it at 50%. So I think it's a big game for Shane, big game for this program. And again, you want to end the year on a positive note, right? You look at 2 years ago when they were able to win out, beat Tennessee, beat Clemson, and how much momentum they had going into those next couple of weeks into the bowl game. People were still talking about South Carolina well into the offseason. And so even if they don't make the college football playoff, I think there's still going to be a lot of hype, a lot of steam for this program if they can beat Clemson, right? And if they beat them by a lot, there's going to be so much more momentum, so much more hype, and a lot of stuff going into next year and into the playoffs, too. If they're one of the first teams out, then they're still going to get a lot of hype and a lot of talk.
And that is a good point. You know, go back to 2 years ago when they last beat Clemson and obviously beat, Tennessee the week before, those 2 massive top 10 upsets. They were the talk of college football the entire offseason. Like, man, look at how this team ended the regular season and even played a fun-spirited bowl game against Notre Dame despite being down, pretty much half your roster at that point in time. Obviously, Carolina was not able to capitalize off that by going 5-7 last year, and certainly injuries and stuff played a part in that. But you have a mulligan opportunity to get again at that as well. Where, man, if you beat a Clemson team, and let's say you do get left out of the playoffs, you're going to be one of the teams that everybody's talking about. Man, they really made a really strong case, even though they got left out, as how you ended the regular season on what would be a 6-game winning streak, and again we'll obviously see what ends up happening in the bowl game coming up a month from now. But you have the opportunity to once again be the talk of college football, or one of the talks of college football the entire offseason, and that's obviously great for recruiting and so many other things for the program that you hope they can capitalize on a little bit better come next year as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. And that's how you ultimately climb this kind of class or K system that's happened in college football, right? That's how you get back onto the national stage. That's how you get South Carolina becoming, what was a household name under the Clowney and Spurrier days, right? Get it back to that, right? So it's just taking steps forward. I think it's huge, and Shane Beamer's doing a great job of it so far. And just he's the right man for the job and everything. Taking this program just step forward. And so I think if you can beat Clemson and beat them pretty badly, it's a humongous step forward. And I think, you're back to kind of seeing where Clemson and Carolina was, in the 2010s, top 25 teams every year and really battling it out. And that makes for fun football in the state. And it's good when both teams are good and creates, excitement throughout the entire state and just the entire Southeast too.
Well, tomorrow provides another opportunity for someone to win the Lawyer Lisa Special Teams Contest as well. $1,200 up for grabs. No special teams touchdowns have happened so far this season. So again, go online to 1075thegame.com. Register if you've not already for the Lawyer Lisa Special Teams Touchdown Contest. We'll come back and talk about women's basketball. They had a dominant win of their own yesterday out there in Fort Myers, Florida, over Iowa State. We'll dive into that coming up next. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Joe Machika from the Big Spur, joining me on your Football Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. It's Tyler Head with you on your Football Friday. Joe Machika from the Big Spur hanging out as he does each and every Friday. And while you may have been, busy and distracted with Thanksgiving stuff, the women's team did play a game yesterday down there in Fort Myers. And I don't even know if dominant is the right word to describe what we saw yesterday. Mauling, perhaps, and annihilation, maybe is a little bit better. A 76-36 win over the Iowa State Hawkeyes, number 15 Iowa State at that. And even that doesn't do justice for just how bad Carolina beat them down. Let's hear from Coach Staley after the game. Cut number 29 here, Dave, on just wanting to put a complete game together.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. We just needed to put a complete game together. Obviously, there were some lapses in the UCLA game that weren't characteristic of us. So we wanted to make sure that we played very, very similarly with our rotations and how we would guard. They're big. Obviously, you have to pay a lot of attention to her. It can't be just one player. It has to be positions, and then you have to position yourself to help if the ball got into it. You have to position yourself if you're not in front. So it is, all of these things that we executed from our 2 days of preparation, and then just from an offensive standpoint. If we can put together 40 minutes of what we did defensively, offensively, in the same game, I think we'd be feeling really good about ourselves, and we were consistent with it. But that is our nemesis, to be able to lock in on both sides of the ball, not have as many lapses or put them on the free throw line as much as we did.
Joe, on Sunday, when Carolina lost to UCLA pretty handily at that, I think we all locally here wondered, okay, is Dawn Staley going to put the fear of God in this team to where they come out and play differently against another tough opponent in Iowa State? Question answered pretty quickly yesterday.
Yeah, question answered pretty quickly, Tyler. They look back to themselves. Put the fear of God in them is one thing. They played like it for sure. No lapses, like Dawn said. It was a full game for them. Still didn't shoot the ball too well, but this was a good Iowa State team. They were ranked inside the top 25. They were supposed to be ranked a little bit higher, but they kind of stumbled, getting up to this point in the year. So no, I think Dawn, had them right where they wanted, and was able to fix exactly what they needed to. And so, I think it was good. They looked great as a team. Again, the only thing that wasn't necessarily going their way was their shooting percentage, which I know they're still trying to work on. But I think cohesively as a group played as one, and was able to just, play like the defending national champions for a full game.
Well, and one thing that was concerning coming away from Sunday's game against UCLA, and I know they obviously had Lauren Betts, who had the size advantage, that Carolina got out-rebounded in that game, which we don't see happen a lot. And when you kind of look at the matchup here, especially with someone like Audie Crooks, that is a good rebounder in her own right for Iowa State, you wondered if that was going to be a problem yesterday. And Carolina won the rebound battle 46-32. So no issue there.
Yeah, pretty significant job on the boards, too. They were just ready. I think, especially that team as young as they were, they didn't like that feeling of the UCLA loss, right? That it just looked like a team that was ready to shake it and ready to get back to business and get back to what they're good at. There were still some things, again, that needed to tune up, but I think overall they felt great about this one. They're playing back like they should. Dawn knows that her team is coachable, and they can learn quickly and snap out of a funk like that. I think that's huge, especially for a team that's this young and wasn't as experienced together as last year's teams have been. I think it's big that, with the loss, they can learn and go from there. We knew this year wasn't necessarily going to be an undefeated season per se, but this team's ability to snap out of a loss and do what they did to Iowa State is great news.
Yep, so sometimes having that teachable moment, and again, going into that game, Carolina had won 85 out of their last 86. The only time they lost in that stretch was to Iowa in the Final Four a year and a half ago, and there was no game after that. There was no, I mean, sure, it was motivation in the offseason. There was no, hey, we're going to go out here 3 days later and play another game and try and be better. So you had the first opportunity in basically 2 years to immediately respond to a loss, and they went out there and did that in spades. 32-0 run at one point in the first half. The bench, Carolina's bench, outscored Iowa State 38-36. I mean, just
that's legit.
Unreal.
Very unreal, Tyler. That's putting your foot down for sure, and showing, reminding the world who you are, if you will. But yeah, South Carolina's deep. The bench is really good. Like, man, oh man, talented team for sure.
So I know you enjoyed watching that yesterday, but right after that game ended, let's go cut number 31 here, Dave. This happened.
Well, this is supposed to be a quarterback draw. They have a light box.
Clock is running with 15 seconds, and it's 3rd and 26. They have one timeout left.
This is like the light box. You could have gotten numbers, but just didn't.
You better hurry. No, this is disaster in the making here. You're going to have to do something when it comes down to this play. Incomplete, and the game is over.
The game was over. For those who did not see it, the Bears facing a 3rd and 26, roughly a little around the 40-yard line for the Lions, down 3 points. Just decided to let the clock run. Just, no, don't need that timeout. We're good. Rookie quarterback against one of the best teams in the NFL. Didn't want to give them, 30 extra seconds to think about things. Make them get everybody up to the line and change the play at the line of scrimmage. Yeah, that was, and for those that don't know, Joe is our resident Bears fan. I felt for you yesterday. I really did.
I appreciate that, Tyler, because we didn't know what we were watching here, and it sucked to be back in the homeland to watch it, because maybe, maybe they start driving, maybe there's some hope, but then you're like, oh, okay, where's the Bears break gonna come? Where are the Bears gonna turn into the Bears and Matt Eberflus, kind of Matt Eberflus, and dragged us down to the wire once again. I believe he's like 5-22 in close games. He needs to be fired yesterday. It's bad. Like, it's really bad. I don't know why the McCaskies and the Chicago Bears are waiting to, fire him till the end of the year. Apparently, sources are saying, not my sources, but sources I've seen, saying that, he's going to get fired at Hallis Hall on Monday. I don't know why you're waiting. He might be fired now, and they're making the announcement Monday. But, I mean, it's ridiculous. You're embarrassing the franchise. You're embarrassing the city of Chicago. It's not great. So, yes, Tyler, I appreciate your support here, because life is not good as a Bears fan, and yesterday was added to the long list of tough losses this season, man. Not fun for pro football.
And here's the thing: they made a great comeback in the second half. They were doing nothing offensively. They had 2 first downs at halftime. The Lions were running up and down the field on him, and they benefited a lot from Jahmyr Gibbs fumbling ahead of the goal line on what could have been a 23-0 hole at one point there in the first half. But they make the comeback. Caleb Williams kind of gets it clicking in the second half, and then to see it fall apart like that. And it's not just Eberflus saying, well, I think we made the right decision. All the players in the locker room were saying, yeah, I don't know what the heck we were doing there. So if he has not already lost the locker room, he may have just done that on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, Tyler, I agree with you there. And especially the way, like, the offensive line, I don't know if it was a screen pass or something they were trying to draw up on the second to last play of the game. The offensive line not blocking or doing something. Like, the faces on those guys when the camera was panning around that offense, it was like, what is going on? And Caleb Williams, rookie quarterback, and rightfully so, is like, I'm listening to directions. I'm not going to change the game over, because then, I mean, you'll have veterans in there that are like, all right, like, what is this kid trying to do here? So I don't know. It's not Caleb Williams' spot to take over the reins of the offense like that with a minute to go during Thanksgiving, right? Like, he would get crucified if that happened and things didn't go right. So. You got to fire Eberflus. Give me Ben Johnson. I mean, we're in Detroit yesterday, so
you just want to take him from the other sideline.
Yeah, just like grab. He can get on the plane with the team. Started meeting the guys on the way back to Chicago. But Ben Johnson, come over. You're the next head coach to Chicago Bears, hopefully.
Let's think about this past 3-game stretch. You had the blocked field goal against the Packers. You lose the overtime game to Minnesota, and then you lose that way to the Lions. All, by the way, divisional opponents. Has there been a more miserable 3-game stretch as far as tight losses that you can ever remember for any NFL team?
Not that I remember. And then you factor in, because, I mean, the Hail Mary was on this, it's a 6-game losing streak. And,
That's right.
The Hail Mary as well. By the Hail Mary.
Yep.
Right. And so, I don't know, Tyler. It's been brutal. After the Packers game, I don't think I've ever taken a jersey off quicker after a game, man. They're inventing ways to lose. I can't remember who said that, but shout out to them. But yeah, it's bad, man. And so, I mean, as I'm using my White Sox fan, I'm here, also a resident White Sox fan here too, I'm sure. It can only go up from here. It can only go up from here, right? It can only be this bad for a while, right? You look at the Lions, where the Lions were a couple of years ago. Now they're Super Bowl favorites. So maybe things will turn in terms of the Bears. Hopefully, we'll see. I don't know.
There's always light at the end of the tunnel. You always have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I hope so, Tyler. And it starts with Eberflus, man. Get him out of here.
Last minute here. What's your score prediction for tomorrow in the Upstate?
Well, I got 35-31.
Okay.
Carolina.
Close game?
I think, yeah, it's going to be a dogfight.
Yeah, should be a fun one regardless. Again, two pretty evenly matched teams across the board. And, man, this time next week we might be talking about Carolina with a shot at the college football playoff. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, Tyler, I love it. Appreciate you having me on as always, and hope your Thanksgiving was great.
Absolutely. Yours too, man. Here's Joe Machika from the Big Spur. We'll come back, wrap up hour number 2 of the Extra Point. Talk about other things happening around college football as we wrap up the regular season. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Football Friday on Black Friday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Football Friday, wrapping up hour number 2. We'll, of course, jump into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Wes and Chris coming up at the top of the hour. Mind you, as always, you can check us out on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends at Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. Just go on YouTube.com, search the Game TV, watch us all day long. You can also take us with you wherever you go on the 107.5 The Game app, in the iTunes Store, or the Google Play Store. Just download it and listen to us wherever you go. This year, perhaps the most intriguing conference to me has been the Big 12. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, talking about Oklahoma State and Colorado playing later on today, where I think most people kind of assumed Oklahoma State was going to have something to do with the Big 12 title race when it was all said and done. That has certainly not been the case. Oklahoma State, again, by comparison standards of what they were expected to do, absolutely nowhere near reaching the Big 12 championship game, as they are dead last. 0-8 in conference play heading into this game against Colorado, coming up later today. And there's still a huge fight at the top to see who's going to get that coveted spot to make the college football playoff. One thing that we didn't really talk about a whole lot earlier on this week that I feel like we should have given a little bit more time to was the real potential that the Big 12 had of actually missing the college football playoff completely. This is something that I don't know if we thought we'd run into, but the wording of how the playoff works in terms of automatic bids is the 5 highest ranked conference champions. Now, when we've talked about that, we just naturally assumed you're going to have the 4 power conferences, the SEC, the Big 10, the ACC, and the Big 12, and then the best group of 5 conference representative. But given the structure of how it works, if there was another G5 champion ranked ahead of another power champion, they would get in. And when we went into last night, Tulane, sitting at number 17, had the best opportunity to potentially make that kind of chaos happen. Now, Tulane ends up losing by 10 points to Memphis on the heels of Mario Anderson running for $177 in that game last night. And that's obviously going to drop Tulane. Now, Memphis, despite having 10 wins, is not going to the conference championship game. That'll be between Tulane and Army, 2 teams that are now unranked. So there is not really an opportunity for the AAC to get a representative into the college football playoff now, and it does open the door where the Big 12 will indeed occupy that final spot. Assuming Boise State wins out here, they would probably still have to go on the road in the first round, given that nobody's ranked high enough to warrant one of those, first round buys. That being said, the playoff or the conference title race is still very murky. Going into this weekend, you have 4 teams tied at 6-2 with Arizona State, BYU, Iowa State, and Colorado. Iowa State, of course, pulling off the big victory against BYU this past weekend. They stormed the field with 1 second left and all the chaos that happened there. They seem to be in the best driver's seat as of right now. It appears, if I'm understanding this correctly, and again, we have so many scenarios now with how these playoffs work or how these conferences work without divisions, that if Arizona State beats Arizona in their rivalry game this weekend, they're in. And there's no question about that. BYU and Colorado going to need some help, which opens up the door to the unlikely, or not the unlikely, the one nobody's been talking about as much. And credit to Matt Campbell up there in Ames for what he's done once again this season by having Iowa State sitting at 6-2, number 8 seed in the country. Because if I'm understanding this correctly, and again, there's a lot of scenarios here, if they beat Kansas State, then they will also be in the Big 12 championship game. And it's so crazy. And I guess this is kind of the beauty of the new playoff in a way, that there are teams that we've not been talking about nearly as much, or really haven't been talking about at all, except for these past couple weeks, that have a shot to jump into the 12-team field. Because, again, we talked about BYU being undefeated until a couple weeks ago. We talked about Colorado, Kansas State, teams like that. And then here at the end of the season, emerging at the right time, is Arizona State and Iowa State, where, again, there's no shot. They get 2 teams in, but we know whoever plays for the Big 12 championship game, again, right now, looks like Arizona State and Iowa State. Winner of that's going to the playoff. Winner of that is going to have to go on the road to a Columbus or a South Bend or something along those lines, but still, they'll be in and have a shot at making a run for the national championship. And again, I think we all kind of expected this league to be wide open this year, given the fact that your two top dogs for the entirety of your conference pretty much have left and gone to the SEC. And it did not disappoint. Much like the Pac-12 did last year with so many teams kind of hovering around the top that ultimately ended up being Washington winning out and going all the way to the national championship game. The Big 12 kind of took on that identity this year. And for anybody that's gotten to watch the Big 12 football, it has been nothing short of very, very entertaining. So we'll see what happens with those teams this weekend and see who'll be representing the Big 12 Conference for a shot at the playoff coming up next weekend in Dallas in the conference championship game. That'll do it for today's edition of the Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Wes and Chris, as we'll jump back into South Carolina and Clemson for tomorrow's game. That's on your Football Friday here on The Game. 11 o'clock on your Friday morning, Black Friday, Football Friday, Rivalry Week Friday. A lot going on here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you. Good Thanksgiving, guys. Everything good? Ready for a full weekend of football to wrap up the regular season?
I'm still struggling.
Yeah.
It was.
How many plates?
Just two. They were big plates, let me just say. But no, it was good. It was good.
Okay.
Didn't have to travel, which was nice. That was a change from the past, but did do a lunch and dinner, so I had to pace myself.
Sure.
At most of those, like not as much dessert as you would normally do. Had to pace myself. What I really want to know is, Wes has tweeted out a picture that had tomato pie on it. I'm looking around. I don't see my tomato pie. I was promised. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah. I definitely forgot.
Surely you have some in the fridge, so I'll be by.
Yeah, I got plenty, honestly.
That looked delicious.
Yeah, it was
homemade. Yeah. Some people go store bought. Just ask.
Do they even have store bought tomato pie? I don't even think that's a thing.
I figured they would. Maybe they don't.
But yeah, I'm excited. I did watch a little football last night.
Wasn't the best day of football, but.
Well, yeah, that's true. But Memphis Tulane, that was a meaningful game.
So I brought this up at the end of the last hour. We didn't really talk about this earlier on this week. The Big 12 is actually in danger of maybe missing the playoff entirely if Tulane won out and won the AAC because, again, it's 5 highest-ranked conference champions. Does not necessarily say the 4 powers and 1 G5. So if chaos continues to unfold in the Big 12 and Tulane had won out, they could have gotten in the playoff and the Big 12 could have been left out. That's obviously gone out the window now because Tulane and Army will be unranked next weekend and not going to have a shot to make it in. But the Big 12 was sweating a little bit until Mario Anderson and Memphis handled things last night.
Yeah, I'm happy for Mario. He's played very well for them this year, and he had a great first quarter. Then it was like very quiet, and then he had a great finish as well, and had a big night. And so, I think for him that's been a really good fit. And hey, Memphis, I think they had a lot of locker room kind of bulletin board material going into that game. They were like 2 touchdown underdogs despite having a really good season so far. And they went into Tulane and just controlled the game, controlled everything. So that actually, I kind of enjoyed that game, and it ended up being okay. Obviously, didn't quite have a exciting finish, but that was a pretty good game. You gotta love. I don't know. There's something about the Thanksgiving football games. I know the NFL has kind of more and more taken over, but I still like the Thursday night Thanksgiving football games. I wish there were a few more, but we do have some today as well. Tyler's Georgia Bulldogs in action tonight, and a couple other games as well.
At the Egg Bowl today at 3:30, which that was kind of weird not having that on Thanksgiving for the first time in a while, because that was a thing after you've had dinner, dessert, or whatever. You turn on the Egg Bowl and see what kind of chaos is unfolding somewhere in the middle of Mississippi, because that always ended up being a weird game for whatever reason.
Well, and one of the most memorable ones involved, I don't really know how to say it on air, but
a bathroom motion.
Yeah,
I guess, for an animal.
Yes. That had lasting ramifications throughout college football.
The domino effect of that is insane to look back on.
Yes, but all right, guys, we got less than an hour. We got to put all of our South Carolina Clemson stuff out there, or we're going to run out of time here.
Yes, we do. And I want to start off with this because, again, this is a top 15 matchup. Both teams with, still playoff hopes on the line. Going to need some help, but regardless, you can have the opportunity to make a big point coming up tomorrow. Looking back on years past, they had the top 10 matchup back in 2013. Plenty of times both these teams are ranked, but is this the biggest game in the history of this rivalry, given what's on the line for both teams this weekend?
That's a big sentence, but you could definitely make a great argument. I wish we could get Tommy Moody's perspective on this, because he would love.
Yes,
he would
would
love this. He would absolutely love this. And is there some game in the past that just we have no context on? Maybe so. There were some really fun, really hyped matchups back in kind of the height of the Spurrier era, and two good teams on both sides of it back then. And, I think, though, certainly for our current era that we've gone into, this is the biggest one. And to me, like, this is, like, there was this big talk about, hey, if you expand the playoff, what does that do for the regular season? Does it diminish some games? And at least in terms of South Carolina Clemson, no, this has opened the door for this game to mean what it does this year. And, we've had some people on our message boards kind of go, I guess, all in on playoff discussion. And some people say, hey, South Carolina's not going to make the playoff. Why are we even talking about this? And I think it's important to point out, this is not a manufactured thing. Like, this is not a local thing. This is something that the national guys are talking about as well. You look right now, you say, hey, South Carolina has a 20% chance to make the playoff. That's not nothing. That's not like a 1% chance. And then if you win the game, South Carolina basically has a coin flip of making the college football playoff, according to ESPN's analytics. Now, you may say, well, what does that mean? I don't know. Is some of that manufactured? Yes. But that means you're in the conversation. And if you'd have told me at halftime of the ODU game, if you'd have told anybody in that stadium, hey, man, you can shut your eyes, and going into basically the Sunday at the end of the regular season, I'd give you a coin flip. I'd hand you a quarter and say, flip it. Heads, you're in the playoff. You'd say, where's the paper? You know what I'm saying? Like,
you could have said that at the end of the game.
Yeah, well, you can say that really at any point this season, but I'm just saying, what if you'd have posted on our message board on Gamecock Central that exact situation, you would have been called insane. And so here we are, and it's there. So I would say, rather than just be, oh, we're not going to make the thing, hey, let's enjoy this. Like, this is awesome for the rivalry. This is awesome for either fan base, and the ramifications to this thing on both sides have really some just big picture, ramifications, short-term and long-term, potentially, depending on how it goes.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I came in today saying I'm going to say to enjoy this thing, right? Like, you don't know how often this is going to come around, even with an expanded playoff. You don't know how often. Shane Beamer and Dabo Swinney in their press conferences this week, and Beamer really leaned into it. We know Clemson's not going anywhere. We don't plan on going anywhere. Get used to this being a very meaningful matchup at the end of the season. And it's always going to be meaningful because of the rivalry. If both of these teams were, 1-10 heading into the game, it would be meaningful. We would all be having the same conversation about, posting jokes on Facebook and, social media and going back and forth with your family if you got family members that are on the opposite side, whatever. But it is more meaningful when there's something bigger at stake, and that's what it is. You always need to enjoy a college football season as much as you can, because you get 7 home games a year. You're guaranteed 12 games a year. Enjoy it, but this one's been pretty special because, like you said, Wes, it's not manufactured. It's not us sitting here saying, well, if they beat Clemson, they should be in the playoff, or this is a team that's very deserving. No, it's like, it's that plus the fact that they're legitimately in this thing. And, there were a whole bunch of teams, guys, heading into this last week of the season, not just a majority, like almost all of them, that are not going to have any shot to get to the playoff, no matter what they do on Saturday, no matter what they've done the whole season, even some teams that have had really good years. So to be one of those few how many are there? 17, 18, like 20, less than 20 teams that, pending the results of this weekend and next weekend, actually have a shot to get in. South Carolina's one of them. So have fun with that.
And on the point of, having fun and enjoying it, and, if Carolina doesn't make the playoff and they're just playing in, the Citrus Bowl or the Reliant Quest Bowl, there's a lot of guys that are probably going to opt out of that game, mainly on defense. Tomorrow, very likely could be the last time you see Kyle Kennard play in a South Carolina uniform. Same thing for Nicky Memori. Like, this special defense we've enjoyed this year, tomorrow might be the curtain call for a lot of those guys.
Yeah, and I think as special as this year has been, you need to enjoy that aspect of it as well. But, hey, just enjoy that you're getting to watch your team playing a nationally meaningful game, and that this rivalry gets put on the forefront. I mean, right now, hey, you have rivalries that have more, I would say, cachet from a national standpoint, but of those rivalries, which of them truly means something right now? I mean, Ohio State, Michigan, Ohio State's favored by like 1 million in that game. Alabama, if there was a major upset, obviously it would be a big factor in the CFP potentially, but Ohio State, I think, is going regardless. So, you look at that one, you look at Alabama, Auburn, I mean, even Ole Miss, Mississippi State, like some of the other rivalries around college football, it's more just like, hey, can you not screw up on this? And if you do, you're going to be in trouble. But for the most part, in terms of rivalry, in terms of being meaningful for both teams, in terms of being a projected, really tight football game, this may be the best one for this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, A&M and Texas obviously have implications of playing for a spot in Atlanta, and, Texas can still get in, I think, even with the loss as well. But, yeah, for sure, a lot of eyes going to be on Clemson tomorrow for what this game means to both sides and how it's going to, shake out with the college football playoff picture as well.
Yeah, and, Texas A&M, that's probably the biggest one nationally, but I think South Carolina right there. And if you're just a football fan and it's noon tomorrow, are you watching Ohio State, Michigan, or are you tuning in to South Carolina, Clemson? I think you're watching Carolina, Clemson.
Talk to Larry Williams from Tiger Illustrated coming up next. Get some final thoughts from the Clemson perspective ahead of tomorrow's game between the Gamecocks and the Tigers. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Football Friday here on the Game.
Will you tell Dave? All right, we're just talking about all this great college football action this weekend, the next weekend, heck, into January, guys. You want to make sure you have the best possible setup at your home from an audiovisual standpoint. You got to reach out to our friends at Integrated Media. If you need a new TV, if you need that TV mounted, if you're looking for Sonos wireless speakers, a sound bar, upgrading your internet if you got dead spots in your home, or a complete smart home system where you can control that device, your other devices, your lights, your thermostat, your security and cameras, just from the touch of one button on your smartphone. They can do that for you. Go check out some examples of their past work. If you want some inspiration, if you want to see the quality of their work, you can get that online, Facebook or Instagram, Integrated Media Columbia. They've been out to my home. They've been to Wes's home. They can come to yours, too, and help you out with all of your AV needs. IntegratedMediaInc.com, Integrated Media Columbia on Facebook or Instagram, or 803-948-8327.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris, along with you on your Football Friday, getting you set for the Gamecocks and the Tigers. Coming up tomorrow, kickoff at noon, pregame coverage starting here at 7 a.m. Gamecocks game day with myself and Terry Ford. Head out to the Left Chevrolet phone lines. Welcome in Larry Williams from Tiger Illustrated. Larry, first of all, appreciate you taking your time this morning. This is a top 15 matchup. Clemson coming in at number 12 in the latest CFP rankings. Is that about where you thought they were going to be? Maybe too high? Do you think 12 is where this team is at in terms of the top 25 this year?
Well, I think, it was fairly easy to predict just given the chaos that unfolded ahead of them last week. Are they the legitimate number 12 team in the country? I'm not going to argue strongly with anybody who says they are, but I want to see more. I've got to see more, just based on what has happened most recently. Obviously, you discount the Citadel game. They've had some inconsistencies over their previous 3 games, and it's not just one thing. Against Louisville, they got just carved up, their defensive front. They gave up a ton of rushing yards, and then in all 3 of those games, the offense had some really prolonged droughts. They had, going into the fourth quarter, I guess late third against Louisville, maybe 3 minutes left. This is when Louisville was up 19 points. At that point, Clemson had 7 points on the scoreboard and 178 yards. And then a week later against Virginia Tech, they had a goose egg on the scoreboard at halftime. And then at Pittsburgh a week later, they were horrific in the second half offensively before Cade Klubnik rescued them with a 50-yard touchdown run. And so that's why I'm in wait-and-see mode, because this South Carolina defense is arguably the best they will have faced all season.
Hey, Larry, it's Wes. Appreciate you doing this, man. You've obviously been around this rivalry for a long time. You've seen a lot. So give us a little more context on where do you think this one ranks this year, just going in on paper in terms of, just overall ramifications. Are we just being media people to say this is the biggest one of all time between the two teams, or do you think that's fair to have that discussion?
I think it's fair to have the discussion. I know, thinking back, you can go way back, and you can go back to, 87, 88. Those 2 games were huge because both teams were really good. That hasn't been the case over the majority of this rivalry's history, in fairness, largely because South Carolina hasn't been very good most of that time. I'll always go back to the Dabo Spurrier rivalry from 09 to 13, and of course, South Carolina, of course, won all those games, but it was just spicy for most of that time. I know that Dabo and Spurrier, since Spurrier left the game, or it's come out, quite frequently that they're pretty good buds, and Spurrier was actually quite complimentary of Dabo privately. I think later during that time, right around 12 and 13, mainly 13, I guess, when South Carolina won down in Columbia, and Clemson fumbled a couple of punts and turned it over a lot. And one of the funniest exchanges that Dabo has revealed is when Spurrier called him, I guess the next day maybe, and said, y'all got a better team. I just don't know why y'all keep turning it over. And that was really foreshadowing, honestly, of what was to come with Clemson rising to a powerhouse level. But you take the current stakes of both teams with a possible playoff shot. Clemson maybe a bit better positioning there. And then just the baggage, I think, of Clemson fans just 2 years ago watching South Carolina snap the 40-game home winning streak at Death Valley that Clemson had compiled. A lot of psychological baggage going on. I think this is a rarity, guys, not just the stakes and the profile of both the teams this year. Clemson fans are apprehensive, I think, based on what I just shared, with the most recent results and their performance compared to the opposite of South Carolina. Gamecock fans are confident. Usually it's the other way around. And so it's just a pretty fascinating dynamic from that respect as well.
Larry, Chris here.
let's dive in a little bit more to a key in this game, and that is, the Clemson offensive line versus South Carolina's defensive line. You mentioned it. We know that Clemson has been banged up on that left side. We know that they have another injury to deal with there now. Do the best you can for us, if you will, of sorting out what is the health situation, and then more importantly, what does that health situation mean for Clemson in this game?
Well, it's been pretty much a disaster over the last few weeks. You had at Virginia Tech, you had the left tackle, Tristan Lee, go down early in that game, and he has not played since. Marcus Tate was a scratch for that game with a knee injury that he's been dealing with. Lee is an ankle. Elijah Thurman, they're promising left tackle freshman who is going to be a star, I think. First play of the game against Pittsburgh, they run right behind him, showing some confidence in that left side. Well, he gets rolled up on by a Pitt player and suffers a season-ending ankle injury. And so I think as you just mentioned, Chris, earlier this week, Trent Howard, who had filled in pretty capably at left guard, suffers a torn ACL in practice. I think the key for them tomorrow is Tristan Lee. Based on everything we can gather, he's going to be back at left tackle, which allows them to then shift Blake Miller, who was playing left tackle in place of Lee and Thurman, back to right tackle. And this is getting kind of complicated, but Walker Parks was at right tackle, was not very comfortable there. Now he's able to shift back to his normal position at right guard. So I think they feel okay. I don't know about Tate. I think he'll play, but he might be kind of on a pitch count, so to speak. And you might have Harris Sewell, the sophomore, there at left guard. In other words, I think they feel okay as far as their starting five goes, but they have zero depth. And that's a steep challenge against a Gamecocks defensive line that is not only excellent, with their frontline guys, but they have some depth on the inside, I believe, on the interior line where they rotate pretty well. And so, and then on top of the offensive line injuries, Phil Maffa, the bruising back, who, at his best is hard to handle. He's been dealing with a shoulder injury for quite a while. And so I don't know how equipped he is to deal with the type of game, the type of really physical, game that no doubt this South Carolina defense is capable of bringing at all three levels, not just defensive line, but linebacker and safety as well with Emin Worry. And so I think Cade Klubnik's going to have to get loose. I think their guys on the outside, their receivers, especially Antonio Williams, Bryant Wesco, and TJ Moore, the two freshmen, they're going to have to get some sort of vertical playmaking going to perhaps set up, loosen things up to set up the run.
And he's Larry Williams from Tiger Illustrated. One more for you here. You got about right at 2 minutes. But talking about injuries, I know Wade Woodaz has been banged up, missed the Pitt game as well as the Citadel game. Would he be tasked with kind of playing that spy role at linebacker and be assigned to Lenore Sellers? And how much have they missed him these past couple of games if he's not able to go this weekend?
Well, I think you miss him. So they have a freshman, Sammy Brown. I think South Carolina recruited as well. He was all everything in high school. He is going to be a star, I believe, and he's been playing more recently because of the injuries. And, I just think with Woodaz, Woodaz brings maybe not the top end, career-type talent that Sammy Brown is going to bring, but he brings that situational awareness, the knowledge of the system, and particularly if you're talking about assigning a spy on Sellers, which is hard for anybody to do. I just think Woodaz would be more comfortable in that role. But I just don't know. I think he's going to play. I think, he's a warrior, and I think he'd play even if he had a limb, one arm, But I just don't know how, I don't know if he's capable of bringing the fullest for an entire game. I could easily be wrong there. And that's really the question I have just about their injuries as a whole with these guys who have missed significant time, is even if they do, if and when they do come back tomorrow, how rusty are they? How fit are they to be in this type of game? I think the last couple of weeks has certainly helped them. mend some injuries and get some of these guys off their feet. But I just wonder the type of physical game on both sides of the ball that this is going to demand. I think it's very fair to have some questions about their guys who aren't 100%.
And he's Larry Williams from Tiger Illustrated. Larry, appreciate your time as always. And not only us here locally, but the entire nation going to have their eyes on this game tomorrow for sure.
Should be fun, guys. Y'all have fun.
Absolutely. Again, Larry Williams from Tiger Illustrated. We'll come back, hit our buy or sell of the week, getting you set for South Carolina and Clemson coming up tomorrow right here on The Game.
All right, folks, you know what? It's our friends over at Gold Line Framing. Check them out on Instagram at Gold Line Framing SC, or just head on over there in person to 511 12th Street, West Columbia, South Carolina. Of course, we've been telling you about them for actually over a year now. Great gift ideas over at Gold Line Framing. Obviously, there's a lot of people sometimes in your life that are just difficult to buy for. Maybe they have everything. How about a surprise gift of a custom framing job from Gold Line Framing? Because if they have any type of keepsake, an autograph, a poster, a signed print, maybe you got somebody who's graduating in your life as well. Give them the gift of a custom frame from Gold Line Framing. You can do that by just go ahead and setting that up, 803-739-1337, or you can go get a gift certificate from them as well. Also, other gift ideas right there in store. They've got Carolina stuff. They've got Clemson stuff. Great place to go for that holiday shopping. It's Gold Line Framing over at 511 12th Street, West Columbia.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you here on your Football Friday, Rivalry Week Friday. Say that 5 times fast. And Black Friday as well, getting you set for the Gamecocks and the Tigers. Coming up tomorrow, we've reached the funnest portion of the week. It's time to buy or sell. Question number 1. Clemson averages 195 rush yards per game, but against the 2 best rush defenses they played this year in Georgia and Pitt, they've been held under 60 yards in both those games. Buy or sell, South Carolina can keep them under 75 tomorrow.
And that was with a 50-yard rushing touchdown at the end of the game against Pitt.
Yep. Klubnik got sacked 5 times in that game.
Okay.
And Maffa had 17 yards on the ground. That'll do it.
Didn't he have like 17 yards on 17 carries?
Yep. He felt the lack of depth on the offensive line that day for sure.
That he did. Under 60?
Under 75.
Under 75.
Yeah, I gave him a couple buffer yards.
I'm going to sell. I can't get there. Yeah.
I wonder, I'm trying to see right now what Prize Picks has the number at. So here's the thing.
low.
Here's the thing that stood out to me. And we just had Larry on. They got it 89.5. We just had Larry on. Moffa's banged up. Guys, who's their next running back?
Jay Hayes, I think.
Yeah, he did the bulk of the load last week against Citadel. But I mean, Moffa's their key guy.
Yeah, listen to this. So Moffa has carried the ball 181 times this year. Klubnik, 82. The very next, Jay Haynes, 36 carries the entire season. So, I mean, Moffa is like, he's a old school workhorse back, but they are definitely like riding him at this point. I'm stalling. 75?
Okay. 75.
Here's my problem with this game. I feel like on paper, I kind of feel like you can buy that.
Okay.
But this is Carolina Clemson. This game always gets drunk, especially the last couple of years.
The 2022 one was hammered.
Like, what are the chances Clemson's going to just roll over? Like,
No.
I don't see that. And here's the other thing. Why is the line so tight? Because on paper, South Carolina should be favored in this game. But I always say Vegas knows.
I was looking at Bill Connolly's preview of the whole weekend, and he had 2 different metrics. And I can't. One of them was FPI, and one of them was his SP Plus or whatever it's called. One of them was literally Clemson by 0.9, that he had in there. And the other one was very slight, too. So, I mean, everybody has it as a close game in terms of the computers.
This is not just for Moffa. This is for Clemson's entire rushing attack.
Their entire rushing attack. These are total rushing yards at the end of the day.
Okay. I'll buy Carolina. Will hold them to that, and I'll say because the sacks.
That was an Yeah, that's the saving grace.
Yeah,
that was an impressive filibuster too. By the way,
I'll buy too. I think the injuries on the offensive line. He mentioned Moffa being banged up with the shoulder as well. It's a lot of things working against Clemson. I think Carolina can hold them to below 75. Let's see. Going back to the Pitt game a couple weeks ago, Nate Yarnell is the only 300-plus yard passer against Clemson's defense this season. Buy or sell, Los Sellers can become the second tomorrow.
I'll buy that he could become the second.
Will become the second. All right. Can I go to the bathroom? May I go to the bathroom? Same difference.
I'm just messing with you, Tyler. I'll sell on that one. I think Clemson, the games I've watched, guys, they kind of just sit back a little bit in zone and make you pick them apart. Try to keep down your explosiveness. Yeah, I'll sell.
Yarnell got sacked 8 times in that game. Yikes. What a weird stat line. 34, 54, 350 yards, touchdown, and interception, 8 sacks.
What a weird team, though. This Clemson, like, I really, statistically.
By the way, that's their best win. That's the only bowl-eligible team they've beaten this year.
True.
I already gave mine.
Yeah, I know. I'll sell too. So, I mean, same reason Wes said.
I'll sell. I think Carolina's going to be a little more heavy on the ground game tomorrow. Teams have been able to run on Clemson a few times this year. I know their defensive numbers overall are good, but there are a couple games they've given up over 200 yards. And I think that's going to be Carolina's MO coming up tomorrow. Next one, Clemson has allowed the most block kicks in all of FBS with 8 so far this year. Buy or sell, South Carolina gets at least 1.
Oh, man. That's a great stat, Tyler. Sell.
You don't think they're going to get one?
Yeah.
Do what?
You don't think they're going to get one?
No. Clemson will put 15 guys out there before they will let South Carolina make another huge special teams play against them like they did to win the game 2 years ago.
I feel like it's so not fun to pick, like, being a complete buzzkill to say no, but I'm with you.
You going to sell?
Yeah, I'm going to sell.
You know what?
Buy it, Tyler.
I'm going to buy.
Yeah, let's go.
And I think somebody wins the Lawyer Lisa special teams contest with a blocked kick that turns into a touchdown. By the way,
to
go
win
online to 1075thegame.com and register if you haven't already for
Describe that. So are you going block field goal or block punt? You said kick. But
it's kick, but which is field goal.
Okay, so you're going field goal.
Block field goal.
For a score.
I don't know if it wins the game at the end, but I think it's going to go in for a score. I'm calling it now.
Man.
All right.
The Gamecock fans making the trip up to the upstate.
I want somebody to win $1,200. Trying to help people out.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
Final one here. Kyle Kennard sitting at 11.5 sacks on the season. Needs 13 to tie Jadeveon Clowney's single-season record. Dylan Stewart sitting at 6.5 needs 8 to tie Clowney's freshman record. Buy or sell, one of these guys will at least tie the record tomorrow.
Oh, buy or sell. So we've talked about this before. The one problem that South Carolina has in terms of stats on the defensive line is that they sometimes snipe each other's sacks.
Yeah.
Like they're like, one guy may start the rush, but then TJ may clean it up, or TJ may start it and Kyle may clean it up. And obviously that's not an actual problem. That's a great thing in terms of football, but in terms of stats and something like this, yeah, it does make it a little bit tough, but I do like the way you said one of them will get there. I think both of them getting there, just because of the way they might be distributed, is probably tough to predict. But you know what? They have an offensive line, even if all those guys are back healthy. Did y'all notice Larry was talking about, well, hey, if this guy can play left tackle, then that guy can move back to right tackle, then that guy can move back to right guard, then that's a lot of moving parts on a line, on a position, I should say, that is built on continuity. And so we know that Clayton White has been much more aggressive this year in terms of different stunts, games, twists up front, whatever you want to call it. I think there could be some situation there for South Carolina to put Clemson not just in kind of the physical situations, but from a matchup, from a scheme standpoint, put them in bad spots. I'll buy that one of the guys will break one of those records.
Clemson, the 4 best defenses they've played, in my mind, and I think the stats back this up, are Pitt, Virginia Tech, Louisville, and Georgia. They've given up 2 sacks to Georgia, 2 to Louisville, 4 to Virginia Tech, 5 to Pitt. So I think Clemson will, A, give up some sacks. I think, B, at least one of them will be to Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart. So I am going to buy it. I think one of them gets it done.
Buy across the board. I think with those offensive line issues, again, even if those guys are able to play, don't know how many of them are close to 100%. Again, if you're mixing match on the offensive line, as we know with what happened here, last year at South Carolina, that always can pose some problems, and they've not seen a pass rush like what Carolina is going to bring to the table coming up tomorrow. So buy across the board for that, and somebody will be talking about having a sack record, or at least tying it come Monday morning. And again, when you kind of look at this, if Carolina does not make the college football playoff, very likely your last chance to see Kyle Kennard play in a Carolina uniform. So again, try and soak it in and enjoy it as much as you can.
Yeah, for sure.
Come back and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Give our final thoughts and score predictions for Carolina and Clemson coming up tomorrow here on The Game.
Yeah, get some injured guys healthy so we can be at our best on Saturday, and then for us just continue to handle the, I don't want to call it distractions, but it's a different week. It's Thanksgiving. Our guys aren't in class. So continue to handle the week the right way so we can be at our very best on Saturday to play really, really well as well. And appreciate you saying that. It's been an awesome year. It's not over yet. We still have a lot of work to still accomplish this season.
Welcome back in. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris, along with you. That was Coach Beamer on Carolina Calls the other night, giving his keys to a Gamecock victory. Coming up tomorrow, of course, Gamecocks better in November and truly playing their best football as of right now. And I know the line doesn't favor them, but again, this is probably the best we've felt about Carolina going into this game in several years now. And again, should probably be a pretty fun, probably back and forth matchup tomorrow.
I'm just still I can't figure out why the line is what it is, which I think if you're a Gamecock fan,
is it keeping you up at night this week?
Well, no, I like to have a pretty good idea of what the expectation is for a game, and I think on paper, South Carolina should be favored in this game. Like I think if you just take out, like I always look at it like what happens if there's just no turnovers, no crazy business, no drunkenness in the game. Like just what happens if the teams just play and there's no crazy things happening? I think South Carolina would have the edge in that situation. Now, the problem is South Carolina is a team that has turned the ball over this year, and Clemson is a team that takes the ball away. And so I think if the game just gets completely off the hinges, obviously anything can happen, and that's when you start talking about, can you deal with adversity again? Can you be fireproof, as Beamer talks about? And can you just make the plays late? South Carolina has gotten behind in these games against Clemson in recent memory. On the other hand, South Carolina this year offensively has been very good on script. So who can take early control of this game? If South Carolina can take early control of this game, I actually do think there is a world where they win not a blowout, but just kind of control the game. If it's opposite, because Clemson, for the most part this year, has been very good in first quarters. They outscore their opponents a ton. Then you get into just find a way to win the game, basically, I think.
Yeah, it's that 2022 game is so hard. Like, both teams want to avoid that type of game because it was so weird. And Dabo Swinney talked at his press conference the other day about that 5-game losing streak that Clemson had and how they were, I can't even remember the number, but it was an insane amount of turnovers to very few for Carolina. That 2013 game that Larry Williams talked about, Dabo still says, I think we were better. They had 6 turnovers. I mean, and that was a close game.
Yeah.
You're not going to win a game turning it over 6 times. 2022, South Carolina, if you just look at like the box score of that game and didn't know the score, you'd be like, yeah, they probably lost because they threw a pick 6 in the first quarter. They got down 14-0. They punted the ball back to Clemson with a couple minutes remaining. Clemson fumbled, right? They lost the turnover battle 2-1. It was on the road. Just a weird game. So if you're South Carolina, you'd like to avoid that. You'd like to go pull what you did in Oklahoma, where you get multiple early turnovers, a defensive score. That was a weird game too. I don't think that's going to happen. But to your point, Wes, Clemson and Carolina have both been good when they're winning early. Which team can establish an early advantage, early momentum, and make the other team feel that pressure and play from behind?
Yeah, because this is not going to be any normal pressure.
That's right. Yeah.
This is rivalry week pressure. This is college football playoff ramifications pressure. So either side would love to just take control and feel that sense of calm, like, hey, we're in control of this game. But is that truly possible? Like, I can't see Clemson laying down because the ramifications for this game, I think in terms of, what would our word be? Optics. The optics of you are now Shane Beamer if you win the game. You're now 2-2 against Clemson, and you're right on the verge of a CFP berth against a team that really owned South Carolina before you got there. So what does that say about the projection of your program moving forward? The other side, if you're Clemson, you want to put South Carolina back in their place and say, hey, we still do things our way. We're still going to make the CFP. I don't need the transfer portal. I do need NIL, as we learned earlier this week. But to me, the broad-reaching ramifications of this thing go even beyond the CFP.
Final scores, I got 34-31 Carolina. What about y'all?
Oh,
I got 31-21 Carolina.
I am 27-20 Gamecocks for this one.
Okay. Wes is a little more
Wes has the two-score game.
Then maybe pulling away there.
Late pull away or control the whole time, Wes?
I'm going to say one of those games where you feel like if you're watching your team, you feel like good about the game, but you're like, it's just
if they make a big play,
can't pull away, and then finally kind of put it away at the end.
Find out what happens in 24 hours. Gamecocks and Clemson coming up tomorrow at noon. Pre-game coverage starting at 7 a.m. Gamecocks game day, myself and Terry Ford here on the game. That'll do it for the Gamecocks Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with myself and Terry Ford coming up next on your Football Friday here on the game.